Hello and welcome to this episode of Beyond the Pass. My guest today is an Indian-born chef who is the only chef in the world to have 2 Michelin stars, and it's such an honor to have him here today. He's on a mission to promote Indian food across the globe, and it's very difficult to get hold of him. So it's a privilege to have you here today.
I'm absolutely honored to be here as well.
Thank you so much for making the time. I was researching about you, and I actually didn't know this fact that you're the only chef from India to have 2 Michelin stars. That is incredible.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your journey. You were obviously born in Delhi, and now you've spent the last 10 years in Dubai. So tell us a little bit about that journey and how you got into food.
It's a thing, I was born in Old Delhi, Chandni Chowk, Daryaganj area. And I think we've realized, and I notice it now because during those time it was very part of the community, because one meal is always out of your home, you always go out and eat at least one meal, a breakfast or lunch or dinner or a snack. You go out and eat something which is like super amazing, tasty. So you've always spent and planned your day around food, without even realizing, because it has become so much important part of everybody's life. Like even at home, you see your uncles and aunts and everyone, they're doing something related to food only. And my dad, like we've had a vegetable wholesale business. So our lives always surrounded around food, and we decide on lunch what we're going to eat for dinner, and dinner decision is made what is going to be prepared for breakfast. So it is true that that food was such an important part of every conversation that it was inherited within from very very small age that we're supposed to love what is available around us. So and I've spent a lot of time in my nani's house, and and it's such a exaggerated number. I always have people say that, is it true? And I said yes. There were about 50 people, my nana's brother and his brother and his brother. So it's like an extended family living in a one big house in Chandni Chowk, and about 50 people. And you can imagine the kitchen of this house. It was like a mini banquet, like 6 o'clock, you see the preparation. Cooker ka seeti bajta tha subah 7 baje, and you get up like that. And then I've seen, the women in the house, their lives were surrounded around food only, Preparation started from the morning, and then once the breakfast is finished, then you already started with the preparation of lunch. And everybody had kind of assigned job, somebody's job is to do the dough of the chapati, roti, and then somebody's doing the peas and shelling out the peas, and somebody's doing, गेहूं चुकते थे and rice को sort out करते थे. So everybody knew what their role was,
It made sense then for your father to have a wholesale vegetable business when you're feeding that many people every day.
I mean, somebody needs to plan how much do you need to order. It was such a professionally run kitchen without even being a professional kitchen. And I think I've picked, and you don't realize it now when I first stepped into a professional kitchen, and that is how I could have related to what used to happen back in the day. Because by then you would not talk about it because it was such a natural thing which you would seeing it every day. And I've been part of this professionally run kitchen from a very small age. So I have a lot of experience of managing a happy run kitchen,
Nice.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that forms the basis of what I do today.
That's amazing. And you decided to go to, hotel management school.
Yeah.
So is that something that your family supported? Was that, did it ever cross your mind to do the more like traditional route of education and engineer, doctor, ye sab?
For that, I was not born to do all of that because I was so bad in academics, and it was really, I'm happy now. If I would have been a little brighter student, then my direction would have been completely different. So everything happens for a reason. I think I was not good in studies. I was good in sports, but then of course your parents were not really supportive. They don't agree though now. They said, no, we were very supportive. I said, shut up, come on. You never let us go out and play. And of course, back in the day, everybody used to tell us, padho, that's more important, and then you decide what you want to do. I didn't score good numbers enough to do any other entrance exam than the hospitality exam. And I have sat for one exam, I've got good rank, so I got into a hospitality college. So, I mean, that is how life turned out to be.
So after you finished hospitality, you joined Old World Hospitality. How did you pick to join that group?
This is again
okay,
one
so
of
tell
those
us how
things where
serendipity happened.
I've only given one interview for this campus placement through Old World Hospitality, and I got the job. And then Indian Accent was nowhere in the scenario, you know. They had other restaurants, they have other QSR business. And as part of the management training program, all the trainees used to go to all the kitchens for a month. So in 18 months, you'll go across 18 outlets for a month, and then your executive chef decide what is your area of preference, where have you done well, and then that becomes your kitchen. So when everybody else followed this program of shifting the kitchen, I happened to be in the kitchen of Indian Accent, which was 77, when Chef Manish came down and do the trials. So it was again by chance, you know, I was there. And then when he came back and the concept got approved, and when he came back to launch the restaurant, he said, I want the same team who helped me when I was doing the trials. So my training program got cancelled, and I was told that now this is your kitchen, you know. And there are many moments during Indian Accent Kitchen where, you know, the group was deciding, okay, we are expanding to Lavasa, for example. So why don't we send him as an outlet chef? And the moment I was about to get transferred, somebody else who was running the kitchen, who would leave the job, you know, resign, and then said, chef, you have to stay back. So I think things have rolled out in this fashion where, as I've said, I didn't make decisions for myself. The universe was kind enough to find the path for me.
That's amazing. And of course, you know, again, I realized that you, within 5 years, got promoted to sous chef, which is very unusual. I'm not a chef, but I, from, you know, running the restaurants, I know that is definitely very unusual.
Yeah.
And you were all of what, 24 when you were sous chef?
25.
That's incredible. But let's sort of spend a little time in that kitchen before, you know, as you worked your way up.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
I mean, it was so surprising when I happened to be during the trials of Indian Accent. I was there from those days, you know. Of course, not doing much, only doing small mise en place because you were a trainee and you were not supposed to be doing anything else than that, you know. But it was so surprising to see that Indian food can be cooked in that fashion also. And it's not, I would not say modern. And, you know, I've realized it now, going forward, that modern is probably not the right term. Indian food is always modernized in its time, you know. And
I actually don't understand this thing of modern, because is it that it's just plated in a fancy way? Is it that, you know, what's modern about it?
I would say, you know, back in the day when, for example, vinegars were not used in India, and Portuguese brought, you know, the use of vinegar in India. They brought chilies in India. So there was Indian food before vinegars and chilies and all of these things, you know. So it means by using these ingredients, the food became modern at that point of time. I mean, if you go by the definition of what we call modern today, I think that was also modern at that point of time. You know, so what was modern actually? So it doesn't mean that if you use a foreign ingredient or you plate a dish very nicely, it becomes modern. You know, it's just a matter of perception. And I think, but yeah, back in the day, everybody used to call it like modern. But I've seen, since Chef Manish has a lot of experience in Asian kitchen, it was so surprising to see how the cooking style can be used to prepare Indian dishes. You know, I've seen ingredients which I would never heard of in school and colleges and all of these restaurants where I've trained already. So you would see umeboshi, for example, in an Indian kitchen, and chef was using it already. And you will see ingredients like blue cheese, Danish cheese, being part of this blue cheese naan. I've seen the first 10 trials of blue cheese naan. I've known the dish from those inception days. So it was like really surprising. And, you know, back in the day, if you would ask any chef which kitchen you want to go in, and everybody would say European kitchen. You know, continental was the fashionable term, and nobody would say Indian kitchen. Indian kitchen was known with Qureshis and everyone, you know, skillful people from Lucknow and north of India and Hyderabad. You would probably see it in Indian kitchen. And I think that all of that started to change from Indian Accent. I could have seen even me, who would say I would cook European food, suddenly was so curious about Indian food, you know, because then the bandwidth was bigger, the playground was much bigger, and the freedom was there. Otherwise, you know, like Italian food, Indian food is also sacred, you know, you can't touch this and you have to make dal makhani like this, even though nobody has a documented recipe of how a dal makhani should be made, you know. That is a curse and a boon at the same time, you know, and we've considered it as if it's a playground. You know, if something is not documented, then you have freedom to, do many things with it. When you see your chef is so passionate, of course you get motivated and you're driven. Like there are so many principles of Chef Manish which I still follow, and of course it makes so much sense to any kitchens.
Like, give us an example.
I mean, he would always say, and you would not see a chef at that point of time giving so much importance to front of the house, service. Otherwise, back in the day, I have seen that लड़ाई ही होती थी. Like back of the house, front of the house, they're fighting. तूने ये गलत किया, and then you have done this and that. But I think for me, to be able to run a successful restaurant, you need
the two to work seamlessly.
I would say you need you need best front of the house team than you need chefs, because he always said कि आप अच्छा खाना अगर सर्विस खराब है, you cannot save even good food, and vice versa. So it's very important, and from that day onwards, it was inherited within us that it's one team, one dream, you have to work together to be able to run a successful restaurant. I think Japan is probably the best example, and I think it should happen with Indian food. I'm not saying standardize it to that fact, but I think you will not see that compromise in Japanese food. If something is not there, then the dish is not there, The dish is not going to be served, or the chef will not make that dish. He will not make that compromise. Wherever in Indian kitchens, you would see that compromise happen. And it starts from the restaurateur point of view also. They will not give you good ingredients to work with, the first thing. But then because he thinks it will not change anything, it will still be okay. But no, if you compromise on the butter in Indian cuisine, then how would you make the food tasty, And I've seen that kind of compromise in Europe, like all the Indian restaurants in Europe, because they would not be insisting on, okay, if I don't get this butter, then I will not go. They will substitute it. They'll probably find a cheaper version. Okay, if the cream is not there, the best one, then I will use probably a substandard version. Then the Indian food will not be as tasty as it should be, And then you're stereotyping everything, and then when you enter an Indian restaurant in London, you will see Hathi ka photo hai, and then you see the music suddenly becomes like 1980s instrumental hai, and then you see a tablecloth with some kind of fancy, colorful linen, and everything becomes like a cliche. The moment you enter, even without entering into the restaurant, I would know the vibe of this restaurant already. And because nobody wants to change, everybody thinks that this is how people know Indian food, and this is how you're going to sell it also. I think that needs to change, because there are not many Indian accents around the world. There are not many Trèsind Studios around the world. There are probably other Indian restaurants which are more around the world, which are setting narratives, a bigger narrative than what we could, Mask or Nar or all of these restaurants can do, or Papas can do. We need more of that to happen, and it's slowly growing. Yeah. But we need more of these restaurants to change the narrative.
So I'm going to come to that to understand, what the perception of Indian food maybe was. So you, after, you then went on, you did a few other gigs, you went to Masala Library, but then you ended up in Dubai.
Yeah.
But before that, you did a stint in New York.
Yes.
And I read somewhere that it was the glamour of going to New York was nothing, didn't pan out the way you expected. Yeah. So tell us what that was like.
The perception of Dubai was also not very great, which is so untrue, But then people will say things about, Dubai is this, Dubai is that, never go there. So it's already, you have this programmed in your head that, if there's an option given to like Indian and Japanese, you give option for Dubai and New York. And then people will say New York is New York, and then it was a good opportunity because I was asked to run this restaurant and H-1B visa. So I could have stayed in New York forever. It was that kind of an opportunity. And if the restaurant didn't work for me, it didn't mean that I've gone ahead and looked jobs in New York, which could have been the immediate reaction.
Right. The obvious thing to do.
Yeah, it's just to search for something which you think is better for you. But I think the whole city, the vibe and everything was too harsh. It was my first time ever going out of India. And to go to New York straight away.
It's like 0 to 100.
Yeah, and there are moments where I remembered the city was not very kind in many sense. The tenant where I was living to the shops where I would go for breakfast in the morning you've always faced challenges and felt that people they don't need you to be there. You always feel
like you said, you were meant to end up in Dubai.
Yeah, so I think it was 1 month only, and I thought that probably any more time spent there, which I would still can't say good or bad, but I think till now it happened for good. And if I've seen the moments where things happened, without me making a decision, it was probably that moment again where I never thought twice, and I said, and Trèsind was opening in Dubai, and Mr. Nath asked me, he said, I will not, when I was going to New York, actually, he gave me a call on a day before. He said, I'm not going to tell you to cancel your trip and come to Dubai, but if you need me anytime, just remember I'm there, And I've never met him. It's just that some people have told him, because it was Masala Library who was supposed to open there. And then there were some people who already met Mr. Nath, and I've served him in Masala Library. So I've met him, yes. I've served in Masala Library in Mumbai. But for a very brief time, I've met him. So he was kind enough to say, if you need me, you call me. And I called him like too soon. I asked him that, is that position still open for me? And he said, we'll figure that out. We'll sort out your visa and you'll fly maybe in next 2-3 days. I said, no, I want to fly out tomorrow. So he got the visa done within hours. He sent me the ticket. I took the flight, landed in Dubai. And I remember this funny moment where I was in taxi going to the hotel in Dubai. And Dubai was, of course, 10 years back was still very different to what it is right now. And even that day, I crossed my mind was such puzzled. I was thinking, should I go back to New York or should I spend some days there and see how it goes? Because you're coming from New York to a desert land and you're saying, okay, man, I don't like that city, but even this is not very cool.
I think, that self-doubt is normal when you're on a journey.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you follow your gut and sometimes you let the universe, like you said, take you where it does. So this was 10 years ago and you were there to open Trèsind, the restaurant, not Trèsind Studio, which came much later. What was the perception of Indian food in Dubai back then? What would you say it is today?
I mean, Dubai was still, I would consider, the Indian food was after India, probably you'll get better food in Dubai. Even 10 years ago, it was the case. There were some small eateries to restaurants run by Chef Atul Kochar and Vineet Bhatia. So there were a big existence of good Indian restaurants also. And I think with Trèsind, when it opened, again with my experience of Indian accent and opening Masala Library and also the first Farzi Cafe, I could have imagined that the city wanted something fresher like that. I would again say modern, which was the term used at that point of time, was really the requirement of the city, because then everybody is looking for that fresh change with Indian food. As I said, that was the cusp of bringing the change with the Indian restaurants, of how I think all the Indian restaurants which opened after Trèsind was wanted to follow that same pathway. And yeah, it was a struggle for 2-3 months, and then suddenly I think we saw a great jump in terms of numbers of people who were coming in. And I think those days Instagram was just getting started, so not many people are coming through Instagram, but I think the social presence was also at the right time. Things happened at the right time. Instagram was becoming bigger and bigger, and then with word of mouth also. I think was the biggest marketing back in the day was the word of mouth. We were used to be in a hotel and everybody is prepped and standing with no guest.
That's the worst feeling.
Yeah. And then what we would do is that we would press the elevator button of lift going down, so that lift eventually, somebody's in the lift, it will eventually open up, and somebody will walk out and see what is. You will do such, I would not say stupid things, but was some desperate things, just to have some people in the restaurant. So we've started from those days. And I've seen those days at Indian Accent also, where there would be 0 guests for lunch and dinner. You prep and throw food and then you start again the next morning. So we were confident because I've seen that good things takes time. And yeah, then the time came for Trèsind also. 2015, it became like a big success in Dubai and it was one of the busiest restaurants.
And then, at some point you ventured to open Trèsind Studio.
Yeah.
So when did that happen and why?
I mean, we've seen Dubai was not essentially the market for tasting menus. And back in the day, I've always seen Dubai in two phases. One is pre-COVID and post-COVID. So even I think pre-COVID was the era of all the big restaurants from Europe and America. They would open in Dubai and they would do amazingly well. Commercially they would draw business and people are seen more in these restaurants. And all the homegrown restaurants used to suffer. And we were one of the homegrown restaurants also. We didn't bring any legacy from India, which was very hard to do back in the day. Like make a successful restaurant in Dubai overseas and bring it back to India. I think that is something we are very proud of also. Otherwise, it's the other way around. You take it from India to overseas, and as I said, the city was full of these big names, and still Trèsind was doing well, but again, we were not being able to stand up against, for example, Zuma and Cipriani, and again, you would see them being very busy and successful, and an Indian restaurant is still Indian restaurant. I mean, we were popular, one of the best Indian restaurants, but I would not say we were one of the best restaurants in Dubai. And I think that is something changed after COVID more. I think because of a lot of things. Mina's 50 Best happened, and then the Michelin happened, and then suddenly the narrative is shifted to the homegrown restaurants because they were doing things differently than what people knew from certain restaurants from abroad. Trèsind was still a big restaurant. And of course, when the restaurant is big, then things are not under your control 100%, and you cannot do what you want to do when you're feeding 100 people every day, more than 100 people every day. And there were a lot of ambitions. There were a lot of dishes which we would do in the menu, but with the complexity of serving it to a mass audience would not make it successful. And we've seen tasting menus in Dubai not doing well. The restaurants who are doing tasting menus, they would open and not work, and then they have to eventually shut down the restaurant. So even the life.
So why was that?
Because I think Dubai was not ready for it.
Okay.
Even when we started doing tasting menus in Trèsind, especially with a lot of Emiratis, they would not know about tasting menus. They would not have patience to sit and wait for 2 hours. They would take tasting menu and they would say, bring everything together, because they have no understanding of.
And that's how they were used to eating.
Yeah, because they would order many things and they want their tables to be filled up. That's not true. That's not a myth, though. That you would see, because they want a lavish meal and they enjoy it. I mean, of course, and you would not see them eating tasting menus.
So it took you a while to even get the studio off the ground.
Yes, but I think we got to a great start with studio because Trèsind was already popular, and then people were anticipating, already imagining that this could be a good venture. But then after like 6 months, we started to see the same guys. We couldn't expand. The bandwidth was still very limited. And again, people were saying, why Indian restaurant studio or whatever is so expensive? Because again, they would think that an Indian restaurant can't be like $200 is too expensive to begin with. And then the comparison again would be made with many Peruvian restaurant or Japanese restaurants. Then we have to come up with something which was more, you have to adapt to the market. Then I remember doing a menu in Trèsind Studio for 200 dirhams. Can you imagine? Now it's 1200 something. So we've done all of that. We've done experiments. We've changed the menus for fun. I think COVID, when the whole world was living in shutdown, Dubai was one of the cities which were open, and I think that became our springboard. From then onwards, I think there was no looking back.
Did you ever question yourself as to whether you were doing the right thing?
100 times.
Yeah.
Like every
and
day.
And what kept you going? Like what was that courage of conviction that kept you going?
I mean, because when we were, Trèsind Studio was inside Trèsind restaurant, so we didn't make that big investment because we were not really sure whether this would work or not. Because we've seen some disappointments with other restaurants who were trying to do tasting menus, and again there were days in Trèsind Studio where on weekend we would make the preparations and we would have no guest, and then you start to question yourself that if you are being too bold with the market, or if you're being too safe, or And then we've done things which easy escapes were there, using truffles and caviars, what Dubai really wanted. And then you would see, okay, this is working, so you going more in that direction, which is probably not very right. But as it says, you should do all the things what you shouldn't be doing so that you know what not to do. So I think we've done all of that. We've done experimentations to this extent where we know what not to do now.
The reason I asked you, the chef, I mean, we went through something similar. I was just telling you that, we've changed our menu a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes when you want to do something bold or you want to introduce something new to the city, you have to have that patience.
Yeah.
And I've, talked to a lot of chefs, restaurateurs over the years, and it is something that needs, yes, you do have to play the market a little bit, but you also have to, stay the course and not give up too easily, because that's when the rewards do pay, they really pay. So
I mean, also, that's why I believe that when the restaurants are small, I decided that I cook for myself first, then I cook for the audience. And you can't make that decision if you have a bigger operations, if you have a commercial partners and you have so much of money involved, then you have to change how you cook. Then you're cooking for people, what people want. But I think it's also very essential to cook for yourself. Post-COVID, we've started to do that. As I said, when the whole world was in shutdown, Dubai was open. And then we explored this opportunity of inviting some chefs who were, desperate to cook. And they graciously accepted our invitation and they decided to come and said, okay, we'll go and spend some days in freedom.
Because it was closed where they were, and so they could.
Yeah, so I mean, it was also kind of, I shouldn't say, but it was blessing in disguise. Yeah. And we cooked with Chef Anna Roche, for example. We cooked with Riccardo Caminini from Lido 84. And I mean, those two pop-ups to begin with was such a big thing in Dubai, and I think cooking with these chefs is not just for pictures. And I think it was also a learning experience where a lot of feedback came from them when they've eaten our food. They said it doesn't need a spoon of caviar on the dish, because we sometimes take our spices, for example. It's just a very generic term I would use, but I think has a bigger impact. Like we will not sweat and make a blend of spice with 10 in it, we know the proportions, we'll smell it 10 times, and then we can do it for fun, but then imagine for someone who've not seen this happening, it's such a bigger deal, than just opening a can of caviar and just placing it on the dish, or just shaving some truffles on the dish. And they've told all of that, that your cuisine doesn't need that. Leave those to us. If you focus on what you do is a bigger picture. And I think in India, we take that for granted, Still we take that for granted. And still I see so many great restaurants with great future. When I see certain things there, I see why you would need that, But of course, in India, probably people expect when they are paying certain amount of money. But I think that should change. We should be proud of what we have as a country than, going out. And I think those decisions have made us stand out in Dubai also. Because you go to any restaurant, a fancy big restaurant, and you would see a pattern of dishes. You would see the kind of dishes, the kind of protein they would use in the menu. And you will not see that restaurant with fresher perspective. And it is kind of boring also, because you would again go to these restaurants and imagine what is coming your way. 5 courses would come with 4 dishes of caviar in it, So, I mean, I'm not just exaggerating on these 2-3 ingredients, but then, I mean, use caviar and use truffle and all of that, but find a unique application of doing it, no?
I agree.
If you can make a sauce out of sea urchin, for example, it's a unique Indian sauce, then you do it. But then just don't place it on a dish. And of course, you enjoy it like that also, but then you enjoy it like that in a Japanese restaurant,
I think, it's what you mentioned earlier, is when you're doing a tasting menu, especially in a small format restaurant, you also sometimes have that burden of making it commercially viable. And I wanted to ask you about this, because this is something we're seeing happen more in India. You mentioned some restaurants like Nar and Papa's, and where they're very small format. Is that honestly a commercially viable operation, or is it sort of branding exercise, and then you have other businesses that are commercially viable?
I mean, it's a cycle, to be honest. When we opened Trèsind Studio, it's just how you think about your restaurant. Like when we opened studio, we never thought that we would make money. That was not the intention, and we planned it that way, because we have liberty of making money out of other restaurants,
Correct.
which was also a very difficult thing to do. It's not easy. But then studio was most to begin with was a passion driven project. But then when you follow a project with so much of passion, then money becomes the byproduct.
Yeah.
So of course we've never made money to begin with Trèsind Studio, but now all the effort which we've made, all the hard work and sweat, now we can see money coming in and from other sources also.
And exactly, so it also pays off for the other brands that are sort of associated
Yeah.
with that. And
I mean, of course, Trèsind Studio also helped other restaurants. It just the group collectively benefits from, and it's not just Trèsind Studio. Even Avatara, after Trèsind Studio, also got a Michelin star, and then we have other two restaurants which are also bib gourmands. And I think Dubai is a city of more bib gourmands than the Michelin restaurant also, because there's so many of great restaurants. Of course, with the format, our bib gourmands are not starred, but then these are amazing places, and there are a bunch of these 15 bib gourmands which are like amazing. So, which is also a greater
so it puts a
achievement.
spotlight for sure on everything
Yeah.
else that's
Yeah.
happening that's associated with the chef or the restaurant.
So that's what I prefer to work. Like if money becomes the priority, then it's a different business,
As long as people understand that that's what it is, that
Yeah.
it's not, of course, it has to be driven by passion, but it doesn't necessarily become independently commercially viable. I think it has other benefits for the group at large, and that's the I'm seeing that across a lot of these small format restaurants, which give chefs the freedom to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
But the impact is in terms of commercials is you do need the other bread and butter in a way to.
But I mean, for example, we've collaborated with the watch brand,
Yeah.
and I think this also become an external revenue.
Yeah.
I mean, not just the watch brand, but then your engagement with many other things you would do would also benefit the books.
Correct.
And
It puts a spotlight for sure.
Yeah,
There's no
so
doubt.
I mean, there is a way to look at the business also with that perspective, that how even if you are not getting what you should be getting out of a restaurant, there are other means of how you can utilize the brand value and still be commercially attached to a project.
Absolutely. So, like you said, you brought a brand from outside India to India, an Indian brand from outside India to India. What is that? What's that journey been like in terms of the diner, right? So, an Indian diner in Dubai, or even a foreigner in Dubai versus an Indian diner in India, is it a bit like selling ice to the Eskimos, or what's the response, or how do you cater to an Indian audience?
Now, I think this was this is something to begin with Mr. Nath, who's the founder of the Passion Group, and Trèsind was born because of his dream, of his father's dream. His father used to have a restaurant in Patna, which was like a very famous restaurant back in the day, but it was like in partnership. And he lost the restaurant. His father lost the restaurant with the partnerships and everything. And he's seen the struggle and the disappointment which his father had with this restaurant, that he couldn't run it for longer. And Mr. Nath always had this dream of opening this restaurant and giving back to his father, like as a thank you, or it's just to fulfill his wishes. Mr. Nath's father has, when Trèsind opened in Dubai, he's come and visited. So he's passed away, but I think that was always the dream of Mr. Nath, to have existence in India also. Of course, he was living in Dubai, so the first restaurant has to be there. But it was always this dream to bring it back to India also, and follow the legacy of his father in terms of the restaurant business also. So I think it was something which he always had in mind, to bring it back to the country, but to a point where we were all really sure of that if this is the right moment. And I think we made this decision after, I think 2014 we opened and 18 we opened in Mumbai. I think Trèsind Mumbai and Studio opened in the same year. So it was like a big year for us. I think because if you see Trèsind Mumbai is very different to Trèsind Dubai.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it is not that the model is exactly the same. Trèsind
So the
Dubai,
menus are different.
menus are completely different. The concept is completely different.
Here you have a tasting menu.
In Dubai, we have tasting menu and a la carte menu. There are a lot of table-side preparations. It's a full-fledged restaurant operation. In Mumbai, it's very different. And Trèsind Studio is very different and Carnival is very different. So I think you have to adapt to the market.
What have you done differently to cater to an Indian in India?
I think, again, if you see Mumbai, still the restaurants would not be doing just the tasting menus. And we saw this bigger gap in the market. And when we opened, there was only Mask. And even Mask was doing a la carte and tasting menu, I think, to begin with, if I'm not wrong.
I don't know how they started, but yeah.
I think there was a bit of an a la carte also.
I mean, I think the tasting menus is still, it's definitely changing now.
Yeah.
But definitely in 2018, it was not a thing,
Yeah.
you know, that you could get a regular audience for a tasting menu.
You know what was the price point of Trèsind Mumbai to begin with?
What?
Tasting menu? 1,500 and 1,800 rupees.
God, you're kidding. That's probably the price of one dish right now on your menu.
It's just that, again, the money took the
Of
back
course,
seat.
yeah.
And we wanted to bring closer to the people to the concept of tasting menus. You know, tasting menus pinches when you multiply the number of people, you know.
True.
Yeah, if it's now...
Plus alcohol, plus this, plus that. Yeah.
But when you go for a la carte and sharing family style meal, then it's still okay. But tasting menu becomes like an experience on its own, and more the people is the multiplication with is higher the money you are spending. So we kept the pricing in that sense where we make it accessible for people to come in, and it really shoot off from there. It was at one point of time too difficult to handle because with that price point, everybody wanted to come and eat, you know, and the big families, 20 people. But I think we persisted a lot. There were many moments where we thought, okay, we can come out of this shadow of being only a tasting menu restaurant. But I think we stuck with our guns, and I think we followed and never changed the concept.
So you've seen it sort of, you know, be more accepted and embraced over the last 7 years that you've been in India, right?
Yeah, I think I would still, without being biased, say Trèsind in Mumbai is the most underrated restaurant in the country, I would say.
I have to say, I've had 2 meals here, and the more recent one actually blew me away. I still remember the kohlrabi, the first course, which was with kohlrabi. That blew me away.
Yeah.
And of course your khichdi, which is you don't understand. On this podcast, I've had so many chefs, and I've asked them, "What's your comfort food?"
Yeah.
They all say khichdi, and you've put that as like your pièce de résistance on the menu. It's unbelievable. And you think khichdi, I mean, you're giving someone khichdi as their main course, but it's just spot on, you know, really.
I think that dish has,
you
can only feel it, you only feel it when you experience it in the restaurant. Because when you see it on the reels, on the Instagram, it felt more theater. And a lot of big journalists and a lot of chefs, they told me that, you know, to begin with, when they saw this thing getting viral, they said, okay, we don't know how it's going to taste like, you know. And then they said it makes so much of sense to have a dish like this. And I think that there are certain dishes which would be criminal to take them out of the menu. Khichdi is one of them. The other one is the khandvi ice cream, which also...
That's a tricky one, huh? Yeah. That's got I think that had a polarizing reaction. But also then the coffee, the chocolate. Yeah, I think we were all so full, but we were like, how do they do this? How do they make this? This was clearly all the non-chefs sitting together trying to figure this out. But
So I mean, Trèsind is a very underrated restaurant, and I'm saying this without being biased because I'm part of it. Because I also go around and eat, you know. I also have a great palate, but yeah, it's okay. I think.
Do you think there's scope to bring the studio to Bombay?
I mean, it will not be Trèsind Studio if we multiply it, because and a lot of people ask me, you know, bring it to London and it will do well, and bring it there, bring it there. I think Trèsind Studio is in such a sweet spot. It will not be Trèsind Studio in India or anywhere else. I think it's a kind of restaurant which can only exist in Dubai, and it's again a project where it will not be same if it's in different city or if it's run by different team also.
I get it.
I
So
would
I
not-
want to ask you
I
about
won't
this.
I won't change a thing. I won't change anything in that restaurant. It is
It's not a scalable concept. I get it. It's a destination, and I completely respect that. Uh, do you think that you being there is imperative, because we're seeing this in a lot of chef-driven small format
Yeah.
restaurants like the ones we mentioned here, and I've talked to chefs about this, where how does the diner feel when the chef's not there?
Yeah. I mean that is what makes me sad, is because in Trèsind Studio, uh, like restaurant, people make reservations from way before. They plan their trips months in advance.
Right.
And sometimes if you're not there, then again, as a diner also, if I would go to a restaurant like this, I may get disappointed. But then that is why my travel becomes so.
This is why it's a rare moment to have you here,
Yeah.
and we need to.
Yeah, it's Ramadan. I could have spent more days, but it is what it is. I try to be there in that restaurant as much as possible, uh, and yeah, sometimes it becomes difficult with the commitments, but then that should be the priority, and it is something which is, I think, it's a prerequisite for a restaurant like that to have the presence of chef all like every time.
What would you say to a diner who goes to the restaurant and the chef's not there? Like, how would you kind of?
I mean, I'll be wrong if I'll say the food will change with my presence in the kitchen, because this is not how my kitchen works. It will exactly be the same or can be even better.
It's on a one-man army.
It's not one man army, but I mean nothing changes in the restaurant in terms of the experience. It's only there are moments where in the restaurant I go out and become part of the experience. But then I think the team is more than capable enough to fill in the shoes. Uh, I wouldn't say much as just go and enjoy the food. I think India is more important than Himanshu in that restaurant.
So you don't think that the restaurant shouldn't be open when the chef's not there?
It cannot be the case because, for example, when you talk about Michelin star or Michelin experience, it is very important. The consistency becomes very important, and I think that is something which a diner should look at. If the experience doesn't change with or without the presence of chef, I think it's probably the best Michelin experience you would imagine, because nothing will change. As I said, for me, the journey of Trèsind Studio begins with this map of India, where we've divided the menu into regions, and every region there are 5 dishes coming out of it. And when I explain the dish, there's not even a single dish in the menu which would have a story and say when I was in India, when I was young.
So it's
when
independent of you as
I
such.
mean, for me, this is I don't feel comfortable. I think I have not reached to that level where I would narrate my own stories and dishes around it. For me, the bigger picture is, as I said, is India, and every dish tells the story of the country. It doesn't tell the story of me being a chef. Whereas when you come to studio, it is more of India being explained to people who think North Indian food is the only Indian food which exists. But I think doing the menu this way is so important in a place like Dubai, because, as I said, people don't know much about Indian food. They think
the spotlight is on India as opposed to you. Is what you're
yes,
saying.
like if there are 5-6 dishes which people know about Indian food, I make sure I don't serve those 5-6 dishes. So it probably be the only Indian restaurant in the world with no breads, with no rice, with
Wow.
there's nothing in our menu, and it doesn't make you miss anything. It'll still be Indian meal, but then, as I said, there can be an Indian restaurant without all the elements, all the stereotypical elements being there. And I think that what makes your restaurant stand out with the other restaurants also.
You mentioned Mina 50 Best and Michelin coming to Dubai, and that sort of being a game changer, obviously. That's also something that we've seen happen recently in India.
Yeah.
You know, the awards, not Michelin obviously, but 50 Best is something that's
Yeah.
Indian restaurants, bars, etc., are getting more and more recognized, and you know, it's fantastic for the industry. But or I've rather also seen where chefs are kind of being maybe more motivated by this than they should be in terms of creating concepts that
Yeah.
fit these, you know, what you expect from a 50 Best restaurant or from a Michelin restaurant. What would you say to chefs?
Of course, you have to have that vision. If that is one of the vision, you must stick with it. But I think it will happen in its own due course of time. You cannot push it. You cannot make it happen overnight. It will. It is not just about the chef, as I said. I always say the chefs who go solo are always more go towards the TV than run a restaurant. So make your own team, give some time, make sure that your approach, your concept is not something it is something now and then next year it becomes something else. You must find your own path. For me, I've found my path with the with the boundaries of India. And I'm not saying I'm doing regional food. I'm saying I'm doing my kind of Indian food inspired from the territory in India, eating habits in India, what grows in those regions. And it cannot be regional, it can be anything. It is just how I imagine Indian food to be. As I said, since it's not been documented, I think I've taken that liberty and freedom to
interpret it the way you want.
And I think if you've spent time in kitchens like Indian Accent, you know that you cannot compromise on flavors. You do anything or everything, the flavor becomes prerequisite.
I agree.
I think with all the chefs who want to pursue this must find their voice, and they must stick with it. Stability is very important. Consistency is very important. And I think patience is very important. For me, the number in the list of 50 best is quite irrelevant because you cannot compare a restaurant in Japan to a restaurant in India or vice versa. I think if you are part of the list, extended or main list, it's still a great list. You're talking about 100 restaurants among millions of restaurants, and it's still great, but I think you shouldn't be fixated on it.
Yeah.
I have this big quote on my wall at studio which says, triumph and disasters are two imposters because one leads to another. People must understand this. You shouldn't be fixated on one thing. Even what you think is your triumph today is probably leading you to a disaster, and what you think is a disaster today is what make you work hard and achieve more. So I mean, they're all imposters, I would believe. And it doesn't stick with you forever. So you work hard to achieve it. Once you achieve it, you have to be consistent and stable and keep following.
It's a motivator in some respects, but it shouldn't be the driving force.
I mean, yeah, people work for 3-4 years and they say that they want to make it to the list. I think the first prerequisite to make it to a list is to make your restaurant fill with people.
Yeah.
So if your restaurant is like have only 10 people for dinner and then you want to be Asia's 50 best restaurant or world's 50 best restaurant, I think it doesn't work. First, your restaurant needs to be full for at least months to begin with, and I think that is something which youngsters doesn't understand. They open a restaurant and they think, okay, we can easily, we want to be.
We've checked all the boxes.
We checked all the boxes. We have a good wine list, and we have tablecloth, or we have a great Instagram vibe, and then we are so cool. I mean, first fill the restaurant with people. That should be
paying customers.
Paying customer. That should be the benchmark, and then it automatically grows from there.
You went from 1 star to 2 stars in a very short span of time. I know, touching all the wood. What did you do differently that made that different? Made sort of that.
The bigger difference is the concept of the menu. When we got 1 star, it was a tasting menu which has a nice flow, but probably not the direction. The menu of what we're doing right now is called Rising India, and we used to call it Tasting India. And before that, when we opened at the new venue, is when we got the 1st star. and the menu has dishes which were tasting menu, probably more like Mumbai, what we have right now. I would not say no concept, but then dishes, the menu which is comprised on a combination of hot and cold or textures, or a interpretation on street food, or so it had that kind of flow where technically the menu was very strong, and that is what it is needed. But probably the larger picture was something which we probably got the next menu we changed. We thought of doing curating this menu, and I think it's a very different experience. And I would not think of any other restaurant, forget Indian or non-Indian, narrating the food in that way. Uh, Already, as I said, there are 6 tables in the restaurant, so it's very small, it's very focused. It feels like every part of the restaurant is under control. There is the service factor in it where I would not say super fine dining is required. I mean, you don't have to be stiff and military style. It has to be also uh, very relaxing at the same time, and not too intrusive. Also, not checking feedbacks. That doesn't make from 1 to 2. I mean, I'm just saying it, but I think from 1 to 2 is just this direction of putting India first made the big difference, because you have to find the flow of the menu. Like how we do it, there were 20 dishes in the menu. So initially we would serve one snack from each region just to begin the meal, and then there would be 3 dishes coming out of each region. So you'll start with the Thar Desert, there will be 3 dishes. Then you move to Deccan Plateau, then there will be 3 dishes. Then the coastal plains, 3 dishes. Then the Himalayan, northern plains, Himalayan mountain, 3 dishes. And you have to build the menu where it makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
I cannot put North India and Himalayan mountains as my first region to begin with, because then it will have those rich preparations. So you will always keep it in the end. So there are a lot of thought, a lot of effort has gone behind finding the concept of the menu. I mean, serving tasty dishes is one thing, and then sometimes you don't even need to serve tasty dishes. Sometimes I have better tasting dishes, but then it doesn't fit into the flow of the menu. For example, there's a crazy idea I could easily give it to you. Is this, once we follow this approach of doing 5 snacks from each region, there's also, with the dessert in the end, is also 5 kind of preparations which are desserts petit for, but it is following the direction. So when we do the coastal plains dishes, we say it's mostly, of course, seafood dominant, and then you get in terms of the sourness is different from different, you start from east coast to the west coast. So begin with kokum, for example, then vinegar, and then tamarind, and then raw mango. If you follow the coastal line, every coast has like a different souring agent, and then of course seafood is of course there. So what would we do with the dessert? If I do a coconut, it can easily be a dish from Deccan Plateau. So what would we do in terms to represent a dish from the coastal plain as a dessert? So we make a iteration of an oyster. We say it's inspiration oysters. There is no oyster, but then the preparation is such that we compile the flavors of oyster. We use oyster leaf, we use rambutan, we make the water of the oyster water with all the flavors of the oysters from the east coast and the west coast. So there is a bit of cucumber in it, there is a bit of melon in it, there is a bit of saltiness in it. So I mean, we developed a dish which is not really an Indian dish.
Right.
It is just telling to an Indian audience who would never know how an oyster would taste like, especially vegetarians. This is how the menu is. It is not just listed dishes in the menu. A lot of thought process is gone behind with the aesthetics of the table in every region. It changes with every region, with the tableware, with even the cutlery, what goes with what, and what kind of everything can be structured. And I think that is why, for me, it happens so quickly. And of course, the consistency is very important.
But is there pressure on you now that you've gone from 1 to 2 to retain 2? Like, do you feel that pressure? Has it changed the way you do things?
I mean, it doesn't really change. The motivation still remains the same. And I must tell you also this one story before I come back to answer you on this question, is why this suddenly this map of India, becomes such an important part of in Trèsind Studio, is because I've done this kind of session in Croatia, which was about modern Indian food. The topic was given by them only, and then I was supposed to speak on this topic, and it was a big festival. So I was speaking in this auditorium, which was a big auditorium, but then next to me was Davies Manes. He was doing a session, so his kind of auditorium was like full of 500 people. In my session, there were only 10 people, and we're talking about modern Indian food. So we can imagine the state of Indian food. It is not a very popular cuisine. And I was talking to the audience and saying Indian food is this, modern Indian food is that. And after 15 minutes, I was realizing that I was not making sense to even 10 people who are sitting there. And then I randomly asked those 10 people that, can you name me 5 Indian dishes, just to see who am I conversing with. And none of them could tell me even more than one.
Wow.
So that was the status of Indian food. In a country like Croatia, which doesn't have a big presence, but then still you can tell 5 dishes. Someone from India would name 5 Italian dishes, even though it will be a cliche stereotype dishes, but then they would still have the knowledge of those 5 dishes. And then that was the question I came back with, what's the point of calling it modern, modernist, and all of that when people can't relate to Indian food, And that is why the idea came in. And I think it is also kind of a khichdi inspired. Because, if you connect the dots, I would understand this, that with the khichdi dish, I was building on to probably a bigger idea, which was doing a menu with the boundaries of India,
What you're saying is modern or not doesn't matter if you don't know the basic.
Doesn't know the basic. And I think there is, as I said, a different definition to modern. What we are doing is probably, there's no need to call it modern because...
Yeah, I've heard like progressive and then there's fusion, there's modern.
Still say Indian food was completely different 100 years ago. It is not the same, and it will not be the same 100 years down the line. So there's no need to call it modern or less progressive or more. So I think that was the thought process with which I came back, and I asked this question to my team: is this probably, what we've been doing all this while doesn't make sense to still a lot of people, so why we call it, there's no need to call it modern. If first let's start defining a bit of Indian food to the people, so that they have better understanding.
So how do you define the food now?
Say it is very personal. I think it's very personal interpretation on Indian food. It's like, it feels like I'm cooking for myself, and I'm making people see India with my eyes. And for example, I had Mr. Sangvi was eating with us, had many meals with us at Trèsind Studio, and I made this preparation, which was a Goan preparation, a dish based on that. And he asked me this question that, Himanshu, I know you personally, that of course you've been in India, but you've never traveled like the lengths and breadths of India. So how did you get this understanding of the flavors? And I think it was a answer which came on the spot. And I said to him that for me, it's very important that I don't know a dish 100%. It's such a bold statement to make, but I'll tell you my reasoning on it. If I know a dish, how it is being made 100%, fully, then I would come back and try to do the same. I would try to be following the same guidelines of what I have seen. But when you don't know it 100%, then you come back and you complete the dish with 50% of your own imagination. And I think that makes a dish completely different. Of course, it has the same outline to it. As an Indian chef who's been cooking Indian food, I can understand also a recipe, how it will taste and how it should be tasting. But that knowledge you must know, and that you'll only get when you cook.
So you're not trying to create authentic recipes, even though that's a very bastardized word.
No, this I'm saying, there is no authentic recipe. But then this is how most of our mind kind of functions. If you know something, then you will say, okay, मेरे को ये उसमें डालना ही पड़ेगा because the recipe calls for that, and I cannot add probably the other thing to it, like probably not an Indian ingredient to it. But I think that is how it should be. Of course, if you know something, you know something. If you doesn't know something, you shouldn't be stopped of doing it, You can use your own imagination, and
it's amazing. It actually, everything you've said makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever thought about Indian food this way. And it goes back to what you said originally that you learned from Chef Manish, which is that there's no, if it's not documented, it's your interpretation of
yeah.
a dish.
All of us chef, when we meet, we ask this question, several times. And I remember Pratik in one of the interviews where we were together, he said, my mom makes mutton curry, your mom makes mutton curry. There are different recipes, both are tasty, both are unique, both are still Indian dishes, But that goes with every dish, no? Why it only means a home style dish can be so variant? Even the green chutney or what my mother would make and what your house would make would be a different recipe. But then would it be less Indian? Would it be progressive Indian? What kind of definition would that dish follow? I mean,
but I think it's that thing that you said right in the beginning, right? That the cliche of an Indian restaurant has been to like typifize certain dishes, and then those are considered the norm, but they're not. That's the biggest myth, right? In a way, because like you said, everyone cooks it differently, and they're all delicious, and they're all Indian. So it's this, standardizing, or what we think is standardizing, which is actually a complete.
No, I always say, for example, let's say butter chicken is probably the most popular, easy to give examples with. And there are 100,000 hypothetical chefs in India. I would say 100,000 hypothetical chefs in India would know how to make butter chicken. And then they all follow the guidelines of it. The general perception of butter chicken is that it can be sweeter. I don't know where it comes from. I come from this place in Daryaganj where Moti Mahal, where it was first being made, was like 100 meters away from my house. So I don't know where it comes from. But then everybody still knows how to make a butter chicken. And they all try to follow the same pathway, same lines, here and there. But then nothing draws completely different out of it. Why? So I mean, because everybody knows how to make it. No?
Any more restaurants in Dubai that you frequent or that you recommend?
There is recently also a restaurant which is like a Thai-inspired restaurant called Manao. It's opened by a chef called Abhiraj in collaboration with the Orfali brothers, and it's probably you will hear more about this restaurant going forward. It's probably one of the best meals I had this year. Is Thai-inspired, so you will see Indian accents in the menu. But then it is such a amazing tasty food. I mean, the fresher take on Thai food. I think it's a restaurant to watch out going forward. Yeah.
Any must eats when you come to Bombay? Like, do you have a thing that you always make a beeline for?
When we only have Trèsind Mumbai, my first meal was always at O Pedro. But I mean, that was one of my favorite restaurants. And now I think it's Ram Asre, and then the Vada Pav at Kirti College. And I really love Tanjore Tiffin also. That is one of the places where I go and eat out. Make sure I go and eat one meal at least at Tanjore Tiffin. Also, I think very underrated restaurant.
We're going to change that. So next time you're in Bombay, we're going to pin you down and drag you there.
I think next time I come, I stay in town only.
Yeah, it's a whole different vibe. So from BKC. So
looking forward to that.
Yeah. Listen, Chef, it's been so great chatting with you and talk to you one-on-one, and and hopefully more people now know.
I mean, we can have version 2.0 because I still think I have not.
I also have a lot more to ask you, but I feel like the recording team might kill me. But or you might miss your flight. But no, we will. I'm gonna come to Dubai. I'm gonna experience it, and then I think we can.
That is a great idea, I think. Let's do it both ways.
We'll do it both ways. Done. Deal. Thanks, Chef.
Pleasure. Thank you.